I graduated from Grambling in 1964 and was hired in Calcasieu Parish as a first-year health, physical education, and dance instructor. Later on that same year, I became a member of the Lake Charles branch of the NAACP. I held many local positions, membership director, all the way to second vice president, first vice president, and eventually local president, being the first female to serve as president of the local branch. I became local president during the 80s. And during my tenure, I was always somewhat of a historian. My first love was that of dance, but I always had a feeling and a great love for my people. And as local president, I led different movements, some local, and then came the Martin Luther King school holiday, where the law had been passed that Dr. King's birthday was a national birthday. And I kept going to the Calcasieu Parish School Board trying to get them to vote for a school holiday here in Calcasieu. And as usually, I was always declined the privilege of doing so. So my first movement was a sit-down, where the tenured teachers would go to work and the non-teachers, tenured teachers, would remain at home. And when that did not work, I decided to petition the school board again. And the last time, there was a vote count of 3 blacks yes and 12 whites no. Well, I told them then that I would commence this struggle until such time I found the relief I was seeking and that I would be back. Nevertheless, the late Mrs. Mary Jane Coston, who chaired the committee, I asked her to contact the Louisiana State Education Chair that we may have the opportunity to go to Baton Rouge and to talk to the entire education committee. And so he granted that. And in preparation, there were many of us who traveled to Baton Rouge, and there were some of the local churches who gave us the bus, the drivers, and water and food to have as we traveled. The late Mr. Gillespie, who worked with the sheriff department, escorted us to Baton Rouge. Meanwhile, we had contacted NAACPs all around Louisiana, 8 corners, and we also had some Black Panthers out of New Orleans from the Desire Project. And they all saw the need and they joined force with me. And there were quite a few when we entered the state capitol. I stood on the steps of the capitol at the top, talking to the group and the need for such an activity, and telling them that Calcasieu Parish School Board had denied us many times. And so, later on, after my speaking, the late Basil Miller, who had been a principal in the surrounding area schools, and the late Mrs. Mary Jane Coston, who was one of the workers who always followed me in my civil rights movements, So we marched inside with the entire gathering to speak to the whole board, education board that is, for the state of Louisiana. There I stated our plight, what we were there for. Ms. Mary Jane spoke first, and then Mr. Bazille spoke second, and then I spoke, telling them what we wanted and what we wanted to do. The late Father Burke, who was the priest at Immaculate Heart of Mary Church, had urged me to do this action because they were the only church in this city that was doing and celebrating the Martin Luther King holiday on a large scale. And our purpose was to have a day out of school so that our children could become familiar with their history. You see, our children don't know any black history, and I firmly believe if a child does not know where he or she comes from, they have no direction in where they are going. And this was my plight. That was our intention, to educate our children within the schools, because it was a school holiday. And so the chairperson of the education board got on the microphone on his telephone and called the superintendent in Calcasieu. And this is what he stated to him. He said, there's a gathering of black people here at the state capitol, and they are led by a black lady by the name of Nancy Bailey Shepard. He said, I strongly suggest that you and your board get together and have your people to pass this holiday in as much as it is already a national holiday, and many parishes are now celebrating by allowing the children a day off to learn the things about their people. And he said, I urge you to actually do this thing, because this lady, she is capable of starting a racial riot in your city. Those are the exact words he spoke. It didn't matter to me what he said, as long as we got the holiday. And so that Tuesday at the next school board meeting, Charles Washam, who always followed me on all of my crises and worked at KPLC TV, was there in the mix. And one of my former dancers, Kim Hunter, who was a member of the then Nancy Shepard Dance Company, was a first-year media person. And she heard my voice and she said, that sounds like Mrs. Shepard. And she ran and she started interviewing me. And Charles had the script and he brought it back to Calcasieu. And it was viewed here for the entire Calcasieu community to see what was done and who was done. I didn't do it by myself. I never took credit for it. There were many, many following me, and many of the churches sponsored the transportation and drivers, as I stated before. Well, anyway, that Tuesday, Charles Washam called me. He said, Miss Shepard, y'all got the school holiday. I said, thank you, Lord, Charles. We've been fighting a long time. And he said, I want to come and interview you. I said, well, we're going to yield age to beauty. I'm a jokester. I love to tell jokes. And Anyway, I said, you go and interview Mrs. Mary Jane Coston first. She chaired it. I led it. And so he did. And then he came back to me and he interviewed me. And when I retired, Charles presented as my gift from him and KPLC-TV all of the movements and works that I had done, and in other areas such as dance and community work, as a gift. And I had it until Hurricane Rita came along and decided to take it, and I had no replacement. But that's how the Calcasieu Parish school system was granted the Martin Luther King school holiday. And the Lake Charles American Press can attest to the fact because they had their reporters also there. I'd like to give credit where credit is due. I never take credit for anything because, as one of my former students spoke today, somewhere along the way there were others who added theirs too. And I think that's the right thing to do.